Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm very happy that I can give a paper on Benjamin Jarnés, whose works I've studied for the past years. So Jarnés was one of the Spanish leading prose writers in the late 20s and early 30s. He lived in the first half of the 20th century. Together with Valentina Andrés Álvarez, Pedro Salinas, Susa Chacel, Antonio Espina, they formed a group of young disciples of the philosopher José Ortega y Gasset, who, having a personal mission to regenerate Spanish literature, published the works of young writers in his magazine, Revista de Occidente. Benjamin Jarnés was one of the few of the novelists of his generation who took his literary career seriously and sought to renovate the narrative discourse, bringing it to a distinguished poetic tendency. His lyrical novels, around 6 out of 15, are also his most experimental ones, considered by most critics as representative for the late Spanish avant-garde, bringing together a mixture of elements from the Cubist, Ultraist, and Surrealist aesthetics. The starting point of my paper is observing the way in which the writer conceptualizes time as an explicit topic of the narrative discourse, through figurative tropes, especially metaphor. The dense lyricism of the Spanish novel of the 20s seems to be a direct heir of the Ultraist and creationist use of metaphor in Spanish poetry. Metaphor was seen as the primordial element of artistic creation by the first wave of the Spanish avant-garde. To Gerardo Diego, Jorge Luis Borges, Rafael Casinos Assens, the metaphor functioned as a way of decomposing and recomposing the objective reality following an intuitive, subjective, and sometimes violent juxtaposition of dissimilar notions. Reinventing a new world means also distorting its main coordinates, time and space. In 1924, Casinos Assens, referring to the poetry of an Argentinian avant-garde poet, points out the importance of time and space for young poets who were trying to give them whimsical dimensions, making them malleable and ductile, as to escape their fatality. My analysis focuses on two of Jarnés' novels, El Profesor Inútil, The Useless Teacher, appeared for the first time in 1926 and then in a large edition in 1934, and Teoría del Zumbel, Theory of the Top String, published in 1930. These two narratives have both an existential approach that places the debate on life, time, and love at the core of the narrative argument. As we shall see, the metaphorical expressions suggesting time are tightly related to those of space and, more importantly, to those regarding human existence. El Profesor Inútil is a collage of several episodes that refer to the protagonist's love affairs with different women who are his pupils. They become his masters in matters of the heart. As J.S. Bernstein stated in the monograph dedicated to Jarnés, the book challenges us to make a coherent sense of the character's subjective poetic perceptions and of his feelings. The fragmentary plot gets reduced to a mere sketch where the main character moves along in an indefinite length of time throughout a rather realistic urban space organized around the streets, cabarets, gardens, museums, markets, and buildings of modern cities like Madrid and Zaragoza. Nevertheless, it is not only the sentimental journey of the useless teacher, who is a parodic figure of the characters in sentimental novels that were very popular in Spain at that time. So it's not his sentimental journey with his frivolous and humorous tone that should catch our interest. Jarnés aims much further in his narrative, using his characters as means of expressing his deep convictions about art, life, love, and time. I'd like to draw attention upon a first example that you have in your handout. It's a fragment where two characters, namely the useless teacher, the protagonist, whose name is never revealed to us, and one of his feminine muses, so they debate on time. The feminine muses, woman's name is Herminia. Like all the other women in the book, she has her name has mythological reverberations, being a feminine counterpart of the god Hermes, which was a frequent presence in other works of Spanish writers. Antonio de Obregón published in 1934 one of the best known Spanish avant-garde novel, hiding the protagonist's figure behind a young, quick and trickster god. The name of that novel is Hermes en la vía pública, Hermes in the public street. Herminia is a governess and gives the useless teacher one of his most fundamental lessons about love, and I quote, And you, where do you live? In the plus present. Explain to me this tense. Today I'm not giving any classes, but I can take some. It's quite easy. You take past tense and you extract what is most pleasant in it and you bring it up to date. You take future tense, a magnificent future. You pass it through as children do, a definite subjunctive. What is left from the sieve is added to the blend. I'm not what I was or shall be, but what I would be if I had been. If this is a false life, in the plus present, all existence intensified in the present day. All in an O, because it's the extreme insecurity, but the only certainty. In the river, water is the only steady thing. Bridges always crack up by means of trying to keep them above life. There is nothing more foolish than wanting to turn a river into a bridge, just like getting a seat to witness our own marching parade. End of quote. The plus present is a conceptual blend integrated by a pleasant past, a magnificent future, both filtered through an hypothetic subjunctive. This metaphor refers to Herminia's way of understanding her life as a being in time, determined not by certainties and securities, but on the contrary, by possibilities, fantasies, and desires. In 1927, Martin Heidegger talks in his Sein und Zeit about the experience of time and that the being of Dasein is time. Dasein as mortal is always oriented towards the future, what it is to come. That is assuming the possibilities he's given, and he's looking back to the essential past that has become a part of the self and that governs the future, all encompassed in the present moment of decision. The utopic time of intensified present moment that encompasses all hypotheses is linked to another complex metaphor, that of life is a flowing river. The apparently conventional projection of the human existence in time as a river that flows and never returns is turned into a paradox. The moving water is steady and firm while the bridges across it collapse. It reminds us of the Heraclitean river where permanent change is indicated by the presence of doubt and insecurity as the only certainty in human life. Nevertheless, doubt is no source of worry or fear. In life, like in art, Jarnés is guided by his principles of vitalism, joy, integrality, and equilibrium in an intermediate point. They are concepts that he invents. In Spanish it would be vitalismo, alegría, integralismo, equilibrio en un punto intermedio. In a contemplative and stoic manner, Jarnés's metaphysics means one escaping in one's own inner self. It is what is inside us that is firm and steady, not things around us. Here we recognize Ortega y Gasset's early philosophy about human life as interiority, as a way of understanding reality from the inside out. As Blas González explained in a book he published in 2005, Human Existence as Radical Reality. It's about Ortega y Gasset's philosophy. In the second chapter, entitled The Faithful River, the river metaphor is extended and linked to a third reference after time and life, that is love. The protagonist is thinking about the end of another love affair on the bank of the Ebro River, and transcendental ideas come to his mind. And I quote, "The river and time never turn back their heads. The perfect faithfulness means knowing when to get away. The other faithfulness is a vain effort of joining two boredoms together. The beauty is to let oneself invaded by the river of the hours. This is the faithful river." In the last chapter, Trotula, added to the second edition of the novel, water becomes again the witness of the teacher's breakup from his last lover, Rebecca. The teacher watches some children making paper boats out of newspapers and floating them in a pool, and then he decides to throw into water Rebecca's letters and photos. What a pleasure to destroy a whole past that way. What a terrific joke it would be on the gloomy old man if I sank all my past years into the water and came out at the side of the pool, turning to another child with only one will, that of being committed to the events of the moment. Water wipes out everything. He immediately destroys everything. He's the grey leveler. He doesn't leave standing dramatic skeletons nor joyful frames. Like a child, he's cheerful and relentless. It is obviously a symbolic destruction by water, an element that up until this moment in the novel has symbolized the passing of time. Therefore, it is an elaboration of the conceptual metaphor, time is a destroyer. The metonymic elements, skeletons and frames, set a medieval war scene, while the personification of water as a great leveler, in its relentless pace, remits to the medieval allegory of death as the reaper. But nothing of the troubling, grotesque images of death and destruction can interfere with this bright anti-hero. His living only for the present is about to rejuvenate him and turn him into a child, annoying the old man. These two antithetic symbolic figures, a playful child, who symbolizes unpredictable fate, and the old man as God, are part of the dreamlike delirium of the protagonist of the other novel, Teoria del Zumbel, the theory of the top string. which is similar to the previous novel in that it lacks chronological plot action and functions as a set of vignettes built around the main protagonist. The storyline revolves around the dandy and rich male character, Saulo Bermudez, who suffers a quixotic transformation as he seduces a pure and innocent girl who has been brought up in a convent. But the short moment of happiness is ended by Saulo's car accident that leaves him paralyzed and eventually kills him. Before he dies, he has a haunting dream in which an old man who believes himself to be God explains the metaphor of the top string. Every human life is a top which I throw to the ground. The top spins long as the spirit moves it. The impulse is measured by the length of the string. I contemplate with sadness these distortedly lives which choose a string as short as yours, Saulo. The influence of Cervantes and Unamuno mixes with surrealist wings and cinematic depictions of scenes. Unlike The Useless Teacher, the tone in Theory of the Top String is darker, more pessimistic and cynical. The novel starts with a prologue named Under the Sign of Cancer, in which Jarnés places his art on vital path of inner exploration of intimate sensations in a process of spiritual autophagy symbolized by the fourth sign of the zodiac, the crab. Although he showed himself quite skeptical about the surrealist art, Jarnés follows again Ortega y Gasset's idea of man's foremost preoccupation of self-conscious interpretation and develops an artistic and existential concept that he calls integralismo. Approaching Carl Jung's three-level model of consciousness, the collective unconscious, the personal unconscious, and the conscious, Jarnés's ambition is to use art, namely literature, to represent the complete self of man. At a closer look, the three-dimensional self of Saulo Bermudez we're about to discover along the pages of the book is a good example of building awareness about oneself, which to Ortega y Gasset represents the essential attribute of man. Saulo, the frivolous and rich Don Juan, leading a careless life of pleasure, is described very well by Ortega phrase to be beside oneself, that is, to act mechanically in a frenetic somnambulism. In the end, when he ends up a victim of fate, the car accident, and his family going bankrupt, Saulo lives the moment of inner revelation when he finally comes to terms with himself. The three levels of consciousness and experience are developed on the basis of an intricate system of macro-metaphors that structure the entire narrative text. The three essential metaphorical expressions, the top string, the pocket gold watch, and the telegram, define Saulo as a being in time, a man that has to face the circumstances of his own existence. If we impose a temporal reading to the three metaphors, we also notice that each one corresponds to a different perspective on time. The top string functions as an existential concept of human life, where the metaphorical projections that emerges are life is time, life is duration, time is moving object, life's duration is the length of the top string, life is a string, life is a game where God is an old man, God is a player, and even God is a child. This takes us back to the same image from The Useless Teacher, of a playful and cheerful child disturbing the old man. The revelations of God appearing to Saulo in a hallucinatory state is preparing him for dying, for living the chronological existence and entering eternity. And I quote, "Let me be, I don't want to live in the absolute, I want my watch back. What use can you get from a mean earthly watch? Nothing has been invented yet to measure your new rhythm. Be obedient, watch with me the magic head of the Zohar that contemplates in itself. Here is your time. The hours look at each other, these of today as those of yesterday, without passing, static, illuminated by the same celestial clarity. Today, yesterday, it's all the same." End of quote. The animated pocket watch is more than a metonymic representation of time. The title of the second chapter, The Biography of a Pocket Watch, takes us to Ortega y Gasset's vitalist view on human life as a biographical, not a biological life, that is an introspective, subjective, self-conscious comprehension, life as narrative. The story around this gold watch goes back to Saulo's grandfather, who bought it as a symbol of prosperity and left it to his son and then grandson as an instrument of measuring the hours of duty, not the hours of pleasure. Thus, the watch stands for Saulo's bourgeois family time and life of tradition, rigor, and durability. Everything that Saulo's life is not. After a night of drinking and partying in a cabaret at the hot spring resort where all the plot takes place, Saulo stops the car in the middle of the road as he's chased by his grandfather's incarnated into a poplar tree that tells him off and asks for his watch back. The watch relates to the past experience that should make the present life of Saulo and determine his future. But Saulo is off track. He lives beside himself, in Ortega's words. His self-conscience arises too late, when the top string has ended and the watch stopped. He clings to the present moment. The telegram that he receives from the city announcing the bankruptcy of the Bermudez Bank is also the one element that speeds Saulo to meet his death. The telegram metaphorically reports different perceptions of the subjective time of consciousness. It pulls Saulo out of a frozen time of relaxation and escape in the hot spring resorts, which was a frequent set in Jarnés' novels, and throws him into an insecure and urgent present. And there you have another quote. I'll just read the second part of the fragment. When Saulo, very angry, he screams to the careless swimmers around the hot spring, "You should all get one of these," he's referring to a telegram. "Then a frantic shake would make you recompose these hours that are now scattered into shreds in the grass, hanging from the tree branches, shattered in your empty conversations. That time should charge you, threaten to kill you, you who are trying to kill it." The hours are objects or bits of matter that can be manipulated according to his will. A rapid movement would make hours move faster, while if one isolates and fragments them into smaller parts, time would slow down, almost stop. The poetic image of hours hanging of the tree branches anticipates the liquid soft clocks hanging from the dry branch in Salvador Dali's 1931 painting The Persistence of Memory. Time killing men who are trying to kill it back is another paradoxical version of the metaphor time is a reaper, where the impression of a rapid movement of time brings us closer to death. The unfortunate telegram is for Saulo a source of anxiety, fear of unknown future, worry for having to confront a tough reality, but most of all because he has to confront himself. Could that devastating feeling be a plausible, rational cause for the accident he suffers near the end of the story, or is it just chance and bad luck? And this is the last quote that I won't give. You have in your handout as well. Gracia Garcia thinks that the telegram is a time accelerator, a death transmitter, as for the rebellion of the unconscious. To Domingo Rodenas, the telegram is a sign of failure, called to sneak into Saulo's unconscious like a personal symbol. The narrator's comment on Saulo's deviating life from a path that had been set for him already suggests that the final event of his life will give him the chance to confront himself, even if an altered state of mind. Speed, time acceleration causes the car accident, the hazardous event that interrupts his string of life. In another novel, from 1928, Paula y Paulita, Jarnés affirmed through the words of his male protagonist, "I'll give myself to chance, kind master of the world." The image of God as a child and as a white-bearded and blue-eyed man is a very subtle irony towards a failed attempt to account for a metaphysical explanation of an universe controlled by chance and irrationality. For John Crispin, Jarnés is an author that expressed it in his early 30s in books like Locura y Muerte de Nadie, The Madness and Death of Nobody, and The Theory of the Top String, the emotional crisis that follows the vitalist era after the Great War. This profound feeling of loneliness and loss defined the writer of the New Romanticism, a movement that orients the avant-garde literature, especially under surrealist influence, towards social and political issues. If we go back to the first novel, we say that the useless teacher's passive and contemplative attitude is indulged and encouraged. Meanwhile, in the Theory of Top String, the young banker's depraved life tends to be rectified and penalized. As I've discussed Jarnés' conceptualization of time through metaphors, I finally like to comment a technical aspect. In both novels, the most original metaphors select images from modern everyday life, top string, a telegram, a pocket watch, or from nature, like the river's water, and multiply their meaning to 2 or 3 target spaces at once, time, life, love, by means of using as well other tropes, like personification and metonymy. From this point of view, Jarnés' images have a lot in common with the ultraist metaphors, which were more involved in a creative process of new realities, as they call them, by means of ingenious conceptual association. His vitalist views on life and art make him keep an equilibrium between the cubist, deconstructive representation and the surrealist, violent and irrational perception. Jarnés' cautious and happy rebellion is against unimaginative, dry and bookish art. His quest for liberation is achieved by the affirmation of sensuality, eroticism and grace, another concept of his, in all his narrative.
Thank you.